Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Lee Everett, Chief Programs Officer for Opera America, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening to join us for this webinar about demystifying the audition process for Opera Young Artist programs. I'm thrilled that we're able to have this discussion be co-sponsored by our good friends and colleagues at the National Association for Teachers of Singing and for the National Opera Association. So thank you for those of you who've come to us for this through those outlets. The audition process is the most common and consistent component in all of the performing arts. As artists, we are prepared constantly for the audition, but very rarely are we coached on what happens once you leave the audition space, or even how who the people are behind the table and how they're involved in the final selection process, let alone where the young artist training structures things that are the same, like utilization of Yacht Tracker for applications, or wildly different. Programs that are cast based on repertoire that they decide upon after they've cast people versus those that are contracting for roles that are already in selected repertoire. Opera America and the members of the Performer Development Forum want to share some of the inner workings of the audition process, what they're working to change, and to be transparent in answering your questions about what goes into the choices made on the other side of the audition table. I'm thrilled that we have a panel of a wide range of our leaders that work with young artist programs from across the field. Joining us this evening will be Carol Anderson, Principal Coach for the Utah Symphony Utah Opera, Julie Barron, Co-founder and Director of Yacht Tracker, Laurie Rogers, Director of Young Artist Programs and Head of Music Staff for Opera Saratoga, Brian Speck, Director of the Houston Grand Opera Studio, Melissa Wegner, Executive Director for the Metropolitan Opera National Council Auditions, and joining us as our esteemed moderator, someone who has the unique perspective of having herself been on the audition stage for many years in the young artist world and is now an administrator on the other side of the table. Please join me in welcoming Preeti Gandhi, Vice President of Artistic for the Minnesota Opera. Preeti, thank you for hosting us this evening.
Thank you, Laura Lee, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm so thrilled to be here to moderate this panel of wonderful folks who will hopefully demystify the audition process for you. Before I became an administrator, I was an opera singer for almost 20 years, had the fortunate circumstance to sing with great houses all over the world, and then moved into administration in 2013 to become artistic administrator at San Diego Opera. I joined Minnesota Opera about 3 years ago as head of the artistic department, and we have a wonderful resident artist program that also took part in the Audition consortium, which we'll hear a little bit about later. And so thank you for joining us. We'll be doing question and answer with everyone after we have our discussion. And I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with kicking it off at the topics for our panel. The first topic that we'd like to talk about is the Audition consortium itself and the overall audition process. As we all know, this year created some seismic changes in the performing arts industry with pandemic. And as a result, most companies shifted everything online, gathering, producing, streaming opera, and of course, auditioning. So of course, this creates a great many changes in how we audition. So Brian, I'd love to start with you. You and Laurie and Carol are part of an audition consortium. Can you talk us through how that came together and what inspired it?
Sure. Yeah, this began about a year ago now, as the pandemic began to take hold and it started to become much clearer to all of us in the industry that it's something we were going to be living with for quite a long time. We started to brainstorm about what we could do to keep the audition world in particular and the young artist programs moving forward, knowing that our programs would continue to need to identify young artists to join us in future years. My concern that I immediately thought of was knowing that our most obvious route was going to be video auditions, and the safest thing for us to do would be video auditions. How would we facilitate a process in which young artists would be able to easily create videos that would be workable for a variety of different companies who have different demands and different programs? So we started to talk about this and met consistently all summer long last summer amongst ourselves to try to create a consortium of companies who would coordinate to create a process that could be unified for young artists who would be interested in applying to any of the programs, and ultimately ended up with 12 programs working together. So the main impetus for this mainly was that I knew that all of the different programs would have slightly different needs, but that if we all operated independently, young artists would be inundated with requests from all kinds of different companies that would have slightly different requirements, and that it would become too much of a burden, especially for young singers, to record so many different videos of different sets of repertoire, a different number of arias in a different order, and that would probably be too much to ask in terms of what we could expect, especially in this season. So we coordinated to create a process that had the same requirements across all of the 12 companies, the same due dates for applications and videos, and then ultimately the same audition process, which was a process in which each artist created a video of 3 arias that were agreed upon by every company that they were to audition for. So they only had to create a single video that could be submitted to every company, rather than say, 10 to 12 different videos. So the charge behind the process really was an honest attempt to try to make things accessible for as many artists as possible this season.
Thank you. That's a wonderful explanation, and to create a consistency across the board is also something brand new for the opera industry in this manner. Lori, I'd love to direct this next question to you. We obviously, as Brian has been describing, we want to make this audition process as transparent as possible for young singers. Can you walk us through the process from where you sat, from posting opportunities through making offers?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. And I do want to preface everything I'm saying by just giving a shout out to every singer out there that's watching this. From our heart, from all of us, we know what a difficult year it's been for you, and how this process, which is normally complicated as it is, stressful as it is, was even more so this year because of the pandemic and the distancing. I am in awe of everything you guys created, what you sent in. I just wanted to make sure I put that out first in front of everything else, because I'm just blown away by the fortitude you all have shown and the products you have been able to come up with in spite of all the barriers that were there. So bravi to everybody, seriously. So there are two different scenarios, because this year was different. In a quote unquote normal year, I work very, very closely with Larry Edelson, who is our artistic and general director of Opera Saratoga. And by August, usually we have our repertoire decided on for the following season. And so we're able to create a list of all the roles that we want to cast from the Young Artist Program, whether it be principal roles, supporting roles, covers. And when we normally list on Yap Tracker our audition announcement, we like to include the roles that we are casting for. So you can look at our announcement and say, yes, I think Opera Saratoga has something that would be a good fit for me. I think I should take this audition. This year, of course, we were not able to do that, because I think by the time in the fall, when we finally posted the announcement with the consortium, we still were not 100% sure of what our summer repertoire would be. Like a lot of companies, we were waiting to see how things developed with the pandemic, what would be possible to us in terms of a venue, because our normal venue is not available this summer because of its size and ventilation and different requirements. So that made a big effect. So when we posted our announcement this year, we did not list role opportunities because we weren't able to. Once we passed the deadline and all the submissions have come in on Yap Tracker, Larry and I each go through every single application separately. We each review them independently of each other, and then at the end, so we really make our notes in a vacuum, and then we cross-reference our notes together, and we make a list of who we would like to, who we think we'd like to hear in audition that we think would be a good candidate for what we are planning for the following summer. And then we do hear the auditions together jointly, either live in non-pandemic year, and this year we went through all the videos together on a very, very extended, I think, series of extended Zoom calls. It boggles my mind that a year ago we didn't really even know what Zoom was yet, how things have changed. So then we go through and we keep a list in between the two of us of each voice part, soprano, mezzo, tenor, everybody, what roles we're looking to fill from that category. So as we're listening to sopranos, is this soprano going to fit the ones we're looking for? If you sing a fabulous Tosca and we need to cast a Blunchen, you can sing the most wonderful Tosca in the entire world, but we're not going to ask you to sing Blunchen. So that's part of our decision process. A big part of our decision process is the casting needs in the end. Then once in a regular cycle of the year, once we finish that, normally we hear singers in New York, Cincinnati, and Houston live. Then we make a little short list and we talk through that list, and we start making offers in November with the hope to have them done by November normally. Usually, I would also preface this, usually we like to have our deadline for our application be a month in advance of the live audition so that we can notify people who would have to travel in normal years, just to explain how this process usually works. If we notify you, we need to hear you in Cincinnati, Houston, that you have time to arrange travel to those venues. Now, this year being very different, and the wonderful thing about the consortium was that you could audition from anywhere and travel was taken out of the factor, so that you could apply from anywhere and didn't have to worry, how am I going to get from Seattle to Houston to make this audition? So that's about the way our process usually goes. We like to have our decisions done by November if possible. This year, we're actually still confirming our repertoire. We're still in the process of finalizing decisions for the summer. We do not own our venue. We are subject to New York State and its vicissitudes as it comes and goes. So we are still in the process of finalizing things. We may be using the Spa State Park where our theater is located, but there are a number of other organizations that also perform there. And we were talking today, we want to make sure that we're not programming an outdoor concert at the same time that Dave Matthews is also programming his outdoor concert. And if you've been to Saratoga, you know exactly what that entails. So this is where we are right now in the process. So I hope that tracks through for you.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yes, and like you said, one of the upsides of all of this is that people no longer have to travel and that they can access a range of audition opportunities. Carol, I'm wondering how this process might diverge at your company, how similar it is, how different. I know that every company has different needs, although we are creating the same audition process with online auditions.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of similarities. What is mostly different is that we just have a quartet and a pianist, and our primary focus, because of state funding, is education and outreach. And so we need to meet those needs before we look for any casting needs on the main stage. We also have an interesting situation in that our resident artist program is often a 2-year program, but there's no commitment to the 2 years. So at the same time that we're accepting applications for our program, our current artists are also applying for other programs. So we're not able always to know that we're going to look for a mezzo. We know perhaps maybe that the mezzo is in a second year, but we don't know, or in a first year, but we don't know if she will perhaps go on to another program. We've had that happen where we've had someone for 1 year and then they go on to one of the larger young artist programs. So that is probably one of the biggest divergences. We don't have the specific casting in mind. We just know we have to fill this quartet. Our process, we're able to be in the same building. So my colleague Christopher Macbeth and I split the screening process and then compiled our notes. We will consult sometimes when we have questions about someone who maybe is on the cusp of being appropriate to hear. And then with our third colleague, Paula Fowler, we reviewed all the auditions in our large rehearsal space through a projection system and a sound system so that we all had a consistent experience of the voices.
That's very interesting. And I want to come back to that point later when I'm talking about recording processes and how it is we're going to equalize that for everyone. So thank you for bringing that up. Melissa, from the competition side, I'm wondering how similar or different that whole process is. What is it like from the time that submissions open for the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions to the end of the competition cycle?
We really made a lot of changes this year. For the first time in recent history, at least, we had a qualifying round. So normally we have 4 rounds of competition starting at the district level, and all of our auditions are usually completely live. This year, we had a qualifying round, which was pre-recorded video, 1 to 2 videos submitted, and that was, a screening round per se. We had about 1,200 applicants, and part of this is because we had no idea how many applicants we would have. we had a fewer number of districts than we usually have. We normally would have had 41 district dates, and this year we consolidated down to 31. We normally have 12 regions. We consolidated to 10. So, and that had to do with making sure that the singers would get focused attention of judges in an online day. We've all learned a lot about video fatigue. So I wanted to make sure that the singers who were competing really would be getting the full attention of the judges throughout the whole day. And so I knew that we were probably going to have to limit the number of applicants from where we usually have them. So we had about a 21 singer limit on those district days, and we ended up with 618 singers that qualified for the district. So we cut that number about in half. There's a whole process behind all of that that we did, and I don't know if we'll touch on it more later, but yeah, it was a lot of really trying to plan ahead as best we can without knowing so many factors. And then our district and region and now semis and finals rounds are all taking place on remote live stream video. So they are live auditions happening on a video platform called Kisui, and primarily. And that has been a really great way forward for us. We've had a lot of work with the singers from start to finish, from before the qualifying round all the way through. Still right now, we're in the middle of our regional rounds, to talk about the technology and to really do a lot of one-on-one work with them. So I'm sure we're going to get into that later, but that's the semis and finals rounds we had hoped would be able to be live at the Met, and we had hoped it would be with the Met Orchestra as always, but the current circumstances are not allowing that to happen. So we're going to continue with the semis and the finals in a remote video format.
Thank you so much. And having been a judge for one of the districts, I can tell you that the platform Kisui was incredible in terms of clarity and sound. Truly, I mean, it was above and beyond Zoom capabilities. Of course, being on Zoom right now, that's a little ironic to say. But thank you so much for explaining that. So now we've heard about the consortium, how it came together, and the overall process. So let's talk a little bit about what happens with the submissions once those start. So Julie, I'd love to talk to you as at YapTracker. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when an artist submits on YapTracker and when their materials are reviewed? Can you explain more about the platform, how it works? Obviously, this is getting a lot more, it's getting a lot more airtime now with the online platform and submissions.
Yes. So actually, what's nice is that we've had a long-standing relationship with all of the companies that were in the consortium, and we've been at this for about 15 years, the application service. So the great thing is that most singers were already quite familiar with uploading videos on our site, uploading audio files, resumes, the standard documents. And the way that YapTracker works is there are two levels of membership that one can have. You can have access to all of the free listings that we post on our site. And then you can just have, as a singer, you can just have a free account, so that the only service that you can access is the application service, because we don't want to penalize folks who don't have interest in the audition information that we post. We don't want to prevent them from applying for programs, of course. So essentially, what's been great about this year is that the consortium for us was extremely clear very early on in telling us exactly what they needed to make this work from a technical point of view. And we were meeting on a regular, I mean, was it weekly? I don't know. It seemed like we were meeting weekly, and from our perspective, it's essentially the same process. And what was terrific about it was that in the past, we would get to each individual deadline, and there would be panicked emails from every corner at the very last minute, 11 o'clock at night, emails from folks who were missing files or couldn't figure out how to upload their resume. But because everything was so uniform this year, I actually was concerned that there would be more of a panic. but in fact, it was the exact opposite. The singers, the companies, everybody was in line, and everybody made sure to get their materials in as early as possible. They were aware that what was at stake if they missed any of the deadlines. The information was super clear, and we were all hands on deck until midnight on the day of the deadline, just in case. And we basically had nobody writing to us with concerns. So from our point of view, it actually was a terrific partnership. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the companies what aspects of it they plan to carry forward, because I do view it as a tremendous success.
Absolutely. And as someone who used Yap Tracker in our own audition process, I can absolutely say that you've all streamlined it to a point where it made it very easy for us. There is the question, however, that I'd love to talk to you about, because with regard to the platform design itself, is there a specific way that you all intended it to be used by those of us listening on the other side of the table? Specifically asking, are there things that artists can do to optimize their materials so they're more easily accessible? I noticed that there was a difference when I was using a tablet or a computer. Sometimes there was a difference in upload times, or the way that some videos would pull up easier than others. And I'm wondering what might be done about that, what you would have to say about that. What's the best way for us to use it as well?
That's a really good point. We actually do limit the file sizes on the site for that very reason, because we know that very often the company administrators are traveling. They may be overseas where the Wi-Fi isn't FiOS broadband, and they're actually downloading the information. Some folks are downloading it for judges who aren't necessarily on Yap Tracker, but need to have the materials in a separate zip file. So what we typically recommend to singers is that we completely understand that you want the highest sample video or audio file because it's what sounds the best to your ear. But what we do recommend is that you do actually listen or view the materials on multiple platforms, that you do look at it on an iPad if you have access to one, or you send it to your mother and ask her to look at it on her iPad. You do look at it on a cell phone. You do look at it on a computer. And so that you can realize that actually, if something is too large of a file, it might actually be difficult for the person who is adjudicating and reviewing your materials. It may actually, the download speeds may not be what you're seeing with one when they have 1,000 or more files that they're looking at a time. The main thing that I think that we run into is that singers often, they like to keep the entire archive of their career stored on Yap Tracker. So they'll have the last 15 years worth of audio files stored in our database. And the problem is that when they upload materials, it actually preloads. The system doesn't know which video file you necessarily want to upload. So there'll be 100 files in their archive. And so that will actually slow down the process for them. So from our perspective, you have to keep your profile relatively clean. Don't go for the very, very highest sample rate, because the difference on a pair of headphones or on an iPad is not going to be as significant as you think. It will make a difference in your studio recording, but it won't make as much of a difference on headphones. So it's better to keep the file size slightly smaller, and your adjudicators will thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That's really good to know. And coming off of that, Melissa, I'd love to talk to you about a subject that I know has gotten some attention online lately as well, about the amount of time that the adjudicators are listening to each video. So in a survey conducted by Opera America, it shows that each program spends an average of nearly 5 minutes listening to or watching each audition. Now we know many arias are longer than that, or multiple selections are submitted, 1 to 3 arias. Can you tell us what factors might be involved in not listening to a full piece? There is a lot that goes into this, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Absolutely. So, first of all, it depends on if you're listening to a screening audition or if you're listening to auditions that you're adjudicating as maybe semifinalists, people that you're inviting to the audition process. So if we're talking about screening, what for us was our qualifying round. Again, this was the first time we ever did this. So what I ended up doing was creating a rubric, like a scoring rubric. And of those 1,200 applications, I personally listened to over 800 of them and sent my family away for the week and literally sat at the same table with the same headphones on, in front of the same computer, in the same chair. And I listened to auditions for 12 to 15 hours a day because until the day before our due date, I only had 150 applicants. So over 1,000 auditions came in the final 24 hours. So so the people who submitted early, I listened to full applications, 2 arias. I took notes. And then by the time, I saw how many people had actually submitted, then I'm on a different schedule, right? Because I had no idea how this was going to go, and I wanted to make sure I was going to be able to get the information to the singers when we had promised it. So for me personally, I listened to a full aria or a majority of one aria and a large chunk of a second aria. For me, those cases are things like I do a bit of a combination of starting by watching the video, because we required videos, not just audio, but videos. I'll start by watching and I'll give it my full attention. And then I'll start to take some notes and I'll start to just listen and not watch, because sometimes there is a difference in what artists are able to give you just through their sound, or also with the visual and the sound. And then at that point, I might still be taking a couple notes for myself, but I'm also thinking about the scoring rubric that I created just so that my colleagues and I could have some sort of a system. And what's interesting is the people whose submissions I listened to the most were the people that were on the cusp of being qualified or not qualifying. It's those people who I probably listened to maybe 15 minutes sometimes, and colleagues and I would send each other, like, I'm not sure about this, please listen. So it's actually those people who sometimes got more of our attention, as opposed to the ones who were definitely on the higher end or the lower end of the spectrum. The great thing about video auditions as an adjudicator is that if you do really like someone, if you're drawn to them right away, you can click to different parts of the track to hear, like, what does the high B sound like? How do they handle the passaggio right here? What does the tricky patter sound like in their second aria? So we do use those videos to that level. At least I do, speaking for myself. Also, if it's something that is repetitive, let's say it's a Handel ABA aria, I might listen to like the first statement of the theme in the A section, skip to the B section, see if there's a change in character, change in color, and then listen to get a sense of, are they ornamenting? What kind of ornamenting are they doing? Is that, connected to the dramatic intentions? We're able to skip around a little bit because of that. That was a little bit of my process, but I know also we didn't actually end up having people submit through Yap Tracker. But Julie, I think the timestamps, it's different when you go through Yap Tracker. Is that correct?
In terms of the tracking of
the time, the watching.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually entirely different, and I think that there's a bit of a misconception of how the YouTube counter actually functions, because the funny thing is that Google actually doesn't give a clear definition of how views are calculated. So there are a lot of reasons why a file might not actually register as having been viewed with the analytical tools that are available. So, for example, privacy settings actually may actually prevent a view from being registered. And the way that the videos are embedded in YapTracker's system, they actually limit how much information is shared externally. And that's a security that's for security reasons and also for privacy concerns. In addition, you know, many of us use private browsers when we're viewing. I know that I often work in incognito mode, especially when I'm traveling. I may be working on a VPN server. So there are many reasons why even a video that's been viewed by multiple people for multiple minutes may not in an external system register that that has happened. But all that said, the conversations that I have had with this group, I am consistently amazed and impressed by how much time and how thorough and how much care every administrator that I have had the pleasure of working with takes on the very difficult process of narrowing down these huge numbers of applicants. And I'm sure that they're going to continue to, all of you and the entire consortium will continue to do so. But I'm happy for them to speak further about your process. But from our perspective, I don't think that it's a cut and dried situation where one can definitively say a counter is 1 or 2 and therefore it was not listened to. It's really not accurate.
I wanted to add something. Julie was asked about optimizing the YapTracker experience. I don't know the YapTracker platform from her side, but one of the things I notice is I tend to gravitate towards the top aria on the submissions list. So if someone submits 3 or 4 arias, I almost always consider the top aria that's uploaded as their starter in a way. And so I think that that's one thing that people could pay attention to. If they don't actually want that to be their starter, they need to just be careful of how they're uploading that. And I don't know if there's a way, we haven't experienced it from the singer side of the platform.
It is organized by the order in which they upload it. But I also wanted to mention that Melissa's experience of 100 applications until 3 days before the deadline or the day before the deadline is consistent across the board and across 15 years. That we typically tell companies that 60% of applications will come in the 3 days before the deadline. And, you know, we send out reminder emails at that point. And I suspect that's why they start coming in 3 days prior. But absolutely, to Melissa's point, I do not adjudicate, but I would assume that if the process were 2 months long and someone sent it in the first couple of weeks and someone sent it in those last 3 days, that it's just the way that time works. You probably get more time if you actually get it in earlier.
And not to,
sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to add, just sort of along those lines, with the consortium being involved, we actually had from about an average of around 300 to 325 applications, ours jumped up into the 800s. And that was because of a number of factors, but I think it was the collaboration. So our process was greatly different this year for screening.
I think everybody saw those numbers. We were meeting all summer and into the fall weekly, courtesy of Opera America. It was just been wonderful to be able to touch base with our colleagues and say, how are your numbers running? Oh my gosh, ours are crazy too. Everybody's numbers were up this year, although they all do spike at the last minute. It's almost like a death watch. The night before the deadline, watching it go 700, 800, 900, 1,000, and just go straight up at the end. We usually get about 1,000 applications, and again, I have to kind of second what Melissa said. we're talking about the screening process first, which is just the decision who we're going to grant an audition to. So it's a screening. It's not the what comes through the Gap Tracker application is just your screening materials. I go out a little differently than Carol does. I do look at the selections that are on there, and I look at which one I think may show me the most immediately about how you're singing. First of all, I mean, are you singing in tune? You know, are you musical? And then we listen to the languages and things, but we do audio first. And so I put on the audio file as I'm reading the resumes, so I can listen and just scan down the resume, but I'm listening to that. I do listen to every single person who applies and a little bit of each selection, if not the entire thing for the screening. So I get a good cross section of styles, of legato singing, of personality, of, you know, what comes through. There's a column on the Yap Tracker page that we get also on the very far side that shows us how many times you have applied and what action was taken. So we can also look at that and see, how is this the first time you've applied to us? Is this the 8th time you've applied to us? Do we see a progression? Have you applied several times and first not gotten an audition, and maybe then you got waitlisted, and then we did give you an audition? Then we see an upward trajectory. So that puts it in context a little bit more. But we do listen. I know I can speak for Larry as well. We listen to each of those screening audio clips to give us a good idea of whether we think it's worthwhile to give you a live audition, or in this case, the video auditions. The other thing I also forgot to plug in here is that I think I speak for all of us. I keep a database, and I looked tonight. I have 4,000 entries in my database right now of singers that I've heard over the years, where I heard you, when I heard you, what you sang, not just our company auditions, but if I judge the Met auditions from Melissa, if I travel across the country and I see an opera somewhere else, I put everybody in my database. So another thing that I do as I'm listening to the screening audio is I also go look you up in your database and go, yes, I remember I did hear you in the Buffalo district auditions 3 years ago and thought you were so promising, and I'm so glad you've applied to us. And so that's also part of my process as well as we're going through the screenings.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is very helpful information for singers to know what's happening on the other side. And even perhaps it might get some singers to turn in some submissions early, knowing that they will get a little bit more of a listening. And as a somewhat procrastinator myself, I appreciate hearing that too. You all mentioned something I'd like to touch on. Laura, you were talking about listening to the audio files and reading their resumes. And Carol, I'd love to ask you this question for the supportive materials like the resumes along now with the videos. How are they used in the review? How do you specifically use them in the review? And how much weight is given to things like awards, recommendations, schools, any opinions that come in when you see different kinds of qualifications, voice teachers, that kind of a thing? Can you talk a little bit about how you're marrying that process with the new online platform?
Yeah, it's so many decisions being made, you know, as to what you're looking at and how you're taking it. Really, the major thing is the audio submissions. Of course, we're all going to say we're all looking for people who sing beautifully. So we look at the resume to see where they've been. Are they on an upward trajectory in the career, or did they appear to have potentially stalled? Have they done a number of programs at our level already? Because sometimes, you know, someone doesn't need to be at our program if they've already done several in the same. It's time for them to move to the next level in their career. So we'll kind of look at the trajectory. As far as recommendations, for the first time this year, and I think it was a great change, we just took recommendation names, reference names, rather than actual letters. And as we're looking at the voice teachers and we're looking at the names on the resume and then also the names they've submitted, we're always looking to see if we have a connection with them, with that singer. What are our degrees of separation? And that's really great because sometimes, you know, Melissa referred to people that are on the cusp. Sometimes we'll hear someone and we like a lot of things that they're doing, but we're not quite sure. We want to find out about them as a person. We'll dash off an email to a mutual acquaintance and say, what do you know about Mary Smith? How is working with her? You know, I hear this in her high range. These kind of things get done. And we all do this. We all know everybody, I think, in some degree. One of the things that is interesting, though, I love when I see someone with a non-traditional path. I remember a couple of times really just hearing an extraordinary singer who did not go to one of the big singing schools, but they had something so special that I had to give them an audition. And I think that that sometimes is a myth that we are looking for a certain conservatory pedigree throughout. Sure, if we know that you've gone to certain schools, we know that you've probably had these kind of experiences, but there's also something really special about something that's not standard and didn't maybe follow the exact path.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I would love to have everybody jump in on the next question. And so I'd love to get sort of a brief answer from all of you, because I think this is really important. And it's something that I noticed as well when I was listening to auditions in December. So many of these young artists are making these recordings from home. They have access to different equipment and locations to make their videos. And sometimes they can record it with a smartphone, and sometimes they've got the access to a studio with a soundboard. I would love to know from each of you very briefly how you can speak to some of the measures that you have in place to make sure that you're giving equal consideration to all artists. I believe it was Carol who had mentioned earlier about listening on the same sound system for everybody. Make sure that we're giving equal consideration to all artists, even though they have different recording capabilities. They've got different acoustic rooms, different microphones, different equipment. I think this would be a really good thing for everyone to know. Brian, why don't we start with you? Would that be okay? Oh, you're muted, Brian.
Someday we'll learn to use Zoom properly. In terms of my own process for listening, certainly I've made sure to always, throughout the process of listening to all of our applications, to have the same setup, as Melissa mentioned. That's become a standard. That is something we talked about amongst all of us extensively, I think, in the past year in all of our meetings. It was, exactly how are we listening? What recommendations could we give to each other for what kinds of equipment gave us the most accurate sound? Also talking about recommendations that we could give to singers. So Opera America, in collaboration with some of my colleagues here, produced a document that gave singers some recommendations in affordable resources that they might use. We also tried certainly to assure artists that they should work with what they have, that we were not expecting people to spend a ton of money to upgrade and buy specialty equipment. And the reason for that, actually, I think in my experience, was simply because on our end, it does not make a huge amount of difference. And that was my experience in listening to so many videos this year, was that the things that I am listening for can be heard in a variety of ways in terms of recording quality. We're listening for the timbre of the voice. We're listening for something individual and special that we can recall in terms of a singer's sound. We're listening for intonation. We're listening for musicality and accuracy and languages. And a lot of those things, I think, can be heard very clearly, even if a singer is simply recording with the internal mic on their phone, which there were many recordings like that I found very useful. The other thing I will say is that, I certainly take note of the situation that singers are in, those things that are very clear in the listening process. It's easy to tell if a singer, for example, is working with a pre-recorded track or singing with a live pianist. And certainly it would make allowances for that, would never penalize someone, for example, for some issues with musical timing when they're working with a track where they're having to kind of try to listen at the same time as singing instead of singing with their own, natural phrasing. So, and you can tell also what space are they in? Are they in a cathedral? Are they in their living room? And what differences might that make in their sound? So it's on us as panelists to listen through that, to really try to hone in on the essential qualities of the voice and the artist. And I think with that mindset and that approach, we were quite successful.
Thank you, Brian. And I just want to mention that Opera America has thrown up in the chat the link to the paper that you had mentioned, so singers can see that for resources. I'd love to move on to feedback unless anyone has anything different to add to what Brian has talked about in this regard of listening. Yes, Laura, you look like you have something to say.
I just wanted to say really quickly, without naming a gender or a FOC, one of the best auditions we heard this year was filmed in a kitchen. And I just want to throw that out there. It was a wonderful audition, and we got this singer's personality, the connection with the text. We got a feeling for how this singer performed. I'm trying not to use a pronoun, but it was really wonderful. So you guys, we know that it was not the best of circumstances. We can tell when you're holding on to the high note just a little longer than you wanted to because the track hasn't caught up with you yet. We know, and our hearts go out to you. And I think we can, speaking for everybody on this panel, we can get past that very easily. But the kitchen audition will go down in history. It was wonderful.
I will add that we asked the singers to disclose what tech they were using, so that the adjudicators could have that information. And also, we've learned so much through this year. And I mean, I've listened to so many auditions at this point, but I can start to tell the differences between like an AT2020 USB mic and an MV88 USB mic, because we spend so much time helping the singers tech them as well as listening to them, and because we've asked for that information. So I would say for companies that are going to continue on with any sort of online screening, it's worthwhile to ask. And also because there's a huge difference between using an internal mic in your computer specifically, more so even than the phone, than an external microphone. I would say after this year is done, I think that the best investment that a singer could make is probably an external microphone. It doesn't have to be more than $250. Like, we're really talking about not a massive college tuition type investment, but it is going to be something that serves you for many years, and it's worth it.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I'd like to move on to feedback. Now, of course, feedback is an important part of this process for singers, and it's a part of the live audition process as well. Lori, I'd like to start with you. In terms of giving feedback to singers, what kind of commentary do you strive to give young performers? Is it done by request? And have you found any changes with this new format in that regard?
Yeah, actually, I can answer pretty easily. We actually, as a policy, don't give regular feedback as part of our Opera Saratoga summer auditions, because what we found is if we give it to one person, then we really, to be fair, have to give it to everybody, and that gets a little bit unwieldy and out of hand. And so we usually don't. The Met auditions are such a luxury that we get to spend time with the singers afterwards. And even though it's usually a very quick few minutes, but just to give them some feedback on that. If it's somebody that I know personally, that I've known for years, they may come to me afterwards and ask, but as a whole, we don't give feedback on principle just because of the sheer number of auditions that we have. So it's a little bit of a hedge, but.
I do understand that. Does anyone have anything else to add to that in terms of the feedback?
I'd love to chime in on that just for a moment. I think I try to give feedback when I can. Like Lori, our general policy is that we're not able to, but when I do have the opportunity, I view it as a great responsibility to give feedback to singers, and especially based on an audition, which is a snapshot of 10 minutes at most, generally, of an artist's life and what they have to offer to you. We're making our best judgments, certainly from that 10 minutes, but we don't know whether it is your best day or your worst day. You know, there are so many factors that would appear and would be very clear to the people who are on your team and can give you the most complete feedback. Whereas I think as a panelist, sometimes we give the best information we can based on the day. So I think for singers, that's something that's important to hear, is that, well, we're always happy to connect with you. I think I can speak for everyone here that we take the responsibility of connecting with you very seriously, and certainly want to endeavor to give you information that you can address, that can be helpful to you.
It is easy to see how the sheer volume of these auditions makes it very difficult for that kind of feedback, but the Metropolitan Opera auditions are definitely a different type of situation, right, Melissa? I mean, you've got the judges there on Kisway, and at the end of the day, everyone's giving feedback to everyone who's in the waiting room. Can you talk, Melissa, a little bit about what might happen if an artist gets feedback that isn't appropriate? What kinds of feedback shouldn't be tolerated? And what can artists do in those situations in the moment?
Sure. We gave feedback even to the singers who didn't qualify, and we did that through a Zoom webinar, and that was me and Beth Clayton, who's a mental health counselor now, as well as a fantastic mezzo-soprano. So we spoke about not only you know, the kind of feedback that I had to give that has to do with the vocal material, the musicianship, the dramatic work and their potential, but also a bit about how to receive feedback, which I think is really important. And then we do have that panel feedback on Zoom after our audition day with the judges. And this year, in advance of that, we had the Met's HR department come on to a call with all of the singers who qualified for the district because first of all, I have very specific feedback guidelines for all of the judges who work with us. And then on top of that, this is a Met activity. So we have the non-discrimination anti-harassment policy that applies to all of this, whether it's live or online. So it's very, very important to me that singers know how much their reporting means to me. If there's an issue that they want to report anonymously, we give them that information. If they want to go through different channels, we give them that information. If they also need some confidence in how do I report this, we talk about you should find an ally, find another friend who would maybe be on a call with you, a video call with me, so that you don't feel alone in this. Talk to a teacher, talk to a coach, talk to maybe another judge who is there to see if there's someone who you could have in your corner. I know that there's a sense of, well, there is real vulnerability, right, in these situations. So that to me is extremely important. Of course, whenever things happen on social media or online, or friends commenting to each other, that's not something that is actionable, that I can take back, or if it's anonymous and I don't know who they're speaking about. So so that's the tricky part, is that it does take courage to come forward and say, this made me feel uncomfortable, but we try and give the singers enough information of what they should expect and where those boundary lines are.
Thank you. It's so important, and especially with equity, diversity, and inclusion conversations continue forward, and we all become much more responsible to what that means. I think the feedback process with singers absolutely is an important part of that process. So thank you for that. We just have a few more topic questions we'd like to hit before we come into our question and answer. So I'd like everyone to just think about this, and hopefully we can get through these. Carol, I'd love to ask you this. The auditions for young artist programs can be spread throughout the year. And if an artist gets an offer from another organization, but they're really interested in your program and they're asking for a status update, how would you handle that? How do you handle that?
We just want transparency on both sides. We want to let singers know where they are in the process, but we also want to know what their options are. So we've had people in the past reach out and say, I have this offer, when will you be making your offer? And we appreciate that just because we like the information. That has been known to push our process faster. When we hear that a singer that we really like has another offer, we'll just jump into action. And I know when I was doing the young artist, I was actually the beneficiary of reaching out and communicating that I had an offer, and it led to speeding up a more exciting offer. So I think we welcome that. Email is always the easiest way because we can, and that's probably the contact information that they tend to have. But I think I would rather hear that than not. And one of the advantages of the consortium is we were able to, in some cases, share some of our people who are our quote unquote finalists. And that was actually useful in our conversations. So we were continuing that at the same time that we were receiving these inquiries.
Thank you. Brian, you talked a little bit earlier about how this consortium came together to work to decrease the burden on artists. There's so many ways: equity, access, taking away the fees. We've seen other changes after the pandemic, like decreasing or eliminating these fees. Holding the auditions online reduces the financial burden of travel. How much of the change made when pivoting to mostly digital auditions are we looking at keeping for future seasons as we move forward?
I think that's a question that's a little bit tricky to answer right now because it's a conversation that we're just beginning to have. So we have all just concluded this audition season. One thing that I can say with great honesty is that we are exploring every facet of that. All of those questions you just answered. This group and many of our colleagues are planning to continue meeting to determine what areas of our processes we can align in the future to make things easier on artists. And also, what we may be able to offer in terms of different audition formats, whether those video auditions continue to be a regular part of the way that we work, or whether we return to live auditions, or perhaps do a hybrid of both. Unfortunately, I wish I had a much clearer answer, but I think the thing that hopefully can provide some assurance to artists is that we are having constant conversations about the financial burdens, especially of the young artist process amongst all of us, and brainstorming ways to continue breaking down those barriers so that more young artists can have access to this process, and that we can see the most exciting singers, that we can possibly get coming to our auditions, regardless of their background. So to be continued, we are exploring all kinds of things, and I hope that, within a couple of months, we're able to share clearly with the community of young artists what our plans are.
Brian, you pretty much hit on the last question that I had for everybody, which was, how is it that we can continue to reduce these barriers for entry for young artists coming into the operatic industry? And I'd love for our other panelists to step in with any ideas or thoughts that they might have to continue on this brainstorm that Brian is talking about.
I would jump in immediately to say that we have permanently eliminated our application fee. And that was I know it's been a huge hot button topic with everybody. And this year I think most companies either lowered it or eradicated it entirely. And moving forward, Opera Saratoga will be taking our fee out. So we'll take that off the table. So we are hoping that will help to continue.
Thank you, Lori. Anyone else? All right.
I hope we
go ahead,
back
Melissa.
to live. I really am just so excited to hear singers and pianists in rooms again with my ears without headphones on. What I do hope is that I've been so impressed at and grateful to the singers who have taken a chance this year and done things in this format. And I've said before, I think we all have to have a lot of grace with each other on all sides of this. And we really, I hope that stays, that remains, that trust building between all the different people who come together to make opera happen at every level. And so that is something that I hope that we can continue to do, is remember that it is something that requires vulnerability and taking risks, and a lot of preparation and a lot of communication and transparency. But none of that functions without an element of trust between us. So I hope that is something that we can continue to build on, because we have found with Zoom calls that we're all just a click of a button away when we need to get together. So I hope that we retain some of the best of the technology that we've learned and get to bring it into live experiences as well.
Melissa, that's a wonderful thought to close out this topic. And I agree with you. It's ironic how the conditions of the pandemic, while separating us, have also brought us together with greater access through video calls, through Zoom. It has a lot to teach us about how we can connect to each other in so many different ways. I want to thank you all so much for answering these questions with such authenticity. And I know that you've given a lot of information to our singers. We'd like to move into our question and answer session now. And I'd like to ask everyone here, if you have any questions for the panel, please go ahead and put them into the Q&A widget that's on the bottom of your screen. And what we'll do is we'll get fed the questions, and I'll be asking them to our panelists. So we've got our first question ready to go for the consortium members. Are there aspects of the group audition process that you think could carry into auditions when it's possible to do live in-person auditions again?
I'll jump in on that. So we actually have a meeting this Thursday to start talking about this topic. All of us who are in the consortium, as well as I think some companies who didn't join us this year, but probably would be interested in joining us in the future. So the group may change, it may become larger. Some of the things that we have talked about for many years that I would love to see happening are sort of a tightening of the audition schedule into perhaps smaller periods of time. It has gotten very spread out over the past 8 to 10 years, which has put an incredible burden on singers, especially to travel and to travel multiple times for so many different companies. And, you know, again, I can't make any promises as we're all working around our own company's individual production schedules. But certainly that would be one goal, is to try and bring those auditions into closer proximity, whether it's geographically or in terms of the schedule. I would also love to see us, you know, continue to move forward with application processes that are as aligned as possible in terms of the requirements, what we're asking of singers in terms of repertoire, in terms of screening videos and or audio, those things having very similar requirements from different companies so that there can be a little bit more of an industry standard. So those are some ideas I have, but certainly I know many of my colleagues will bring other ideas to the table that we'll discuss.
Thank you, Brian. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Great, then I'll move on. Oh, yes, Lori.
No, I would just, you mentioned some standardized repertoire and things, and also Carol could probably speak to this more than I could, but we are also looking at standardizing requirements more across the board for pianists and conductors as well, because that's been a big issue. I don't know how many pianists are on the call, but I hope there are some who probably have to learn different rep for every company that they apply to, and trying to find a way to streamline and standardize some of the things that we require of our pianists as well, so you don't have to learn the finales to 18 different operas for all your auditions.
Thank you for speaking to that. We've got our next question ready here. When we are post-pandemic, crossing fingers that it's coming sooner rather than later, do you all intend to go back to the way things were before, or will some of these tactics be carried into the future of your operations, particularly when it comes to the Met competitions? And I believe this is referring to digital, not requiring travel.
Well, I really hope that we can have the semis and finals continue to be live streamed. That is a big hope and dream of mine for many, many years. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but part of the reason why you do a competition is to sing for a wider audience, and what's a bigger audience than the internet. So I do hope that that remains part of it. And as for the rest of it, you know, it's really for us kind of too soon to know. We have been in this like bubble of getting the job done, and we haven't had the time yet for the reflection. We still have one more weekend of regional events to go. So I think that we will certainly be influenced by this year. I'm not quite sure yet how that will be. So it's not even worth speculating when I just haven't even talked to my team about it. It's something we're doing in April.
Right. Certainly there does need to be time for all of us to sort of take stock of how we've all reacted to this year and move forward and find out what works best and what didn't. So thank you.
I would love,
yes.
I just want to chime in real quick. One thing that I know that we're going to keep that was incredibly successful were Zoom interviews for our finalists. And that was for singers and pianists. The engagement portion of the position is so important. And we found that interviewing singers away from the pressure of just having done an audition was so much more successful. They were able to be in their home and be relaxed, and we were able to give them some topics ahead of time. So I know we're going to keep that in the process.
And that actually goes into my follow-up question here. We've got some folks wondering whether pre-screenings will continue online. And I'm wondering if we all feel like that will actually continue in terms of equity, access. It sounds like everyone is agreeing that that's probably something that will continue. Yes. Thank you. Looking for more questions here. All right. Will piano tracks continue to be accepted in place of live accompaniment moving forward, even once collaborating in person becomes safe again?
I mean, there's no substitute for me for live piano versus recorded piano. We required all of our singers to use recorded piano tracks because we had to standardize things that would fit COVID requirements throughout, honestly, the world, because some singers were singing from Asia and Europe and all over the place. So we required piano tracks. As some of my colleagues have said, you're always at a disadvantage in some way, but it was the thing that we could do to kind of level the playing field. I really hope that moving forward, I mean, this is a collaborative art, right? I think many of us have never missed our pianist colleagues as much in our entire lives as we have this season. And we are so grateful to the work that they have done creating these tracks. But but I find it personally to be night and day between using a live pianist in a room with you. I think that tracks can be really helpful in practice. And I think that there are digital apps and things that singers can use while they are exploring repertoire, while they are trying to figure out tempi that work for them, even while they're trying to figure out kind of where their voice is sitting and different keys. You can run through so much more repertoire if you're kind of using some different tracks or apps or YouTube tracks that exist, but nothing will ever, ever, ever take the place of collaborating with a pianist.
I want to say one thing to that, though. One of the dubious benefits of this pandemic and using the tracks is there goes the excuse, I'm afraid I can't bring this aria to my audition because the pianist may not know it. So at least now you can sing that aria that you've always thought maybe I shouldn't bring because the pianist won't be able to play it. Now you can find a pianist who can play it and make you the track. So there is a dubious upside.
The other upside, of course, is a question of equity, right? Access to a pianist, paying for a pianist on the day of audition. So that is also something to consider as well. We've got our next question here. What are some of the differences between identifying singers for young artist training programs versus auditioning for summer seasons, for example, with specific roles that need to be filled? And how does EDI figure into these audition processes?
From the standpoint of our process at Houston Grand Opera, and perhaps maybe Lori can speak to some differences here because there would be probably the greatest contrast. We have no need to consider casting in the process, really. We're able to accommodate a large variety of different artists into our program because of it's sort of larger, longer scale as a 2 to 3 year program. Generally within that 2 to 3 years that we would have someone with us, we'll be able to provide some opportunities based on the amount of repertoire that we do. Occasionally, very rarely, but occasionally there will be a singer for whom we just don't have the stage opportunities. And so that might factor in at the end stage of the process if we just feel like maybe we're not the right company to provide that training to you if we can't really put you on our stage. But as I said, for the most part, that's not a guiding influence on us. So in terms of how that affects equity, diversity, and inclusion, we are really, we're not looking to casting as a part of that equation.
I would agree with Brian on all those points. I'm a little confused by the question because I'm not sure if they're asking about being considered for main stage roles as opposed to a young artist position. Is that what the question's asking?
No, I think he's asking about both.
Okay. Because we do make a determination prior to auditions, which roles in our main stage part of the season will be taken by young artists and which we will engage, for lack of a better word, a professional, non-young artist, principal artist to sing. So that determination is made beforehand. So when you're auditioning for us, you're being considered for every role that we believe could be taken by a young artist. So I hope that speaks to that.
Yes, thank you. We have a similar process at Minnesota Opera as well. We look at the tracks that we've created for our resident artists, and we're looking at those specific tracks because we know these other roles are going to guest artists. Carol.
Well, yeah, in our case, as I said earlier, the outreach is the major portion, but we plug the singers into roles in the main stage when that's appropriate. And I will say that in our process this year, as we screened, we kept the question of diversity and inclusivity on our minds all the time throughout the screening process, making sure that we were actively considering and giving attention to those qualities. Because we understand that the conversations have been difficult and painful and they need to continue, and we have to reflect that in what we show in our programs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to that. What are your thoughts about singers who are a little older, who didn't do young artist programs right out of college? If singers don't have master's degrees and have gap years on their resumes, will that deter you when you're looking at their resume, when you're listening to them? And how do you address the financial privilege of the pay to sing system? We've addressed this a little bit with the equity question, but I open this up to the panel.
for me, I look at resumes just in that they help tell kind of complete the story about you. I'm always listening first. Um, but for instance, if I notice that you have beautiful Italian, then I might look and see, okay, did they study Italian as like one of their majors? Did they spend time in Italy? It helps answer a question for me. Uh, and same thing in terms of, let's say, a resume gap, a Fach change. You can see that on a resume.
Mhm.
It just answers some questions. If you've been singing tenor repertoire for only 9 months and baritone repertoire for 5 years before, that helps me know what kind of feedback to give you. It helps me imagine where you're at in that process. If you've taken time off, same thing. It for me, it just kind of gives me a little bit better idea um, of maybe where you're at today, and we can have that conversation later in the feedback. None of it is a deterrent for me. And I also certainly do not expect that people would attend pay to sings and like think that that is something that elevates their resume above other people. It just is another layer of experience. And there are plenty of areas of experience that don't go on that resume, like other kinds of jobs that might make you incredibly personable and great for a community outreach position. Those kind of things we haven't put on resumes, and but it's part of your story. So I think depending on what you're applying for, you should customize your resume for what speaks to your strengths for that position.
Yeah, I would say I mean, the voice comes first over everything else. The voice comes first. If you're singing well, we're going to be interested in you. The resume contextualizes things a little bit for us. We definitely don't check, gee, did this person go to the right school, get the right degree? I don't care if you got a master's degree or not. I really don't. But it shows me the track you've been on, which is interesting. It put things in context. I could have a whole separate conversation about the special skills section of the resume. Um, what I love seeing is the teachers, conductors, directors, coaches part of the resume, because as Carol said, there's about 1 degree of separation from all of us. And for me, usually it leads back to Garnett Bruce, but we all do know each other, or we know someone who knows somebody else. And so that portion of the resume I'm fascinated with, because I can hit up somebody that I know, or if I know they've been in Carol's program and they're applying to my program, I've known Carol a long time. I can just shoot her a quick message and go, how did you find working with so-and-so? The resume helps connect us with other people, and it just shows us your track. We also have a field in the application to our company, and I think a couple of my colleagues do too, that says, is there any additional information you would like to let us know in your application? And people have taken that opportunity to say, yes, I had to take a year off because I had a parent who was seriously ill and I couldn't sing and take auditions, or put in some kind of, we don't want your entire life history, but if there's something that's relevant to maybe a gap that's on the resume that can explain, why that's in there, we provide that opportunity in our application as well.
I need to say that as levity, if you do have a portable special skill, you need to be prepared to exhibit it, because sometimes in the middle of a long day of auditions, we want to hear someone sing Part of Your World in Pig Latin.
I
True
had
story.
someone that said he had a wicked evil laugh, and I said, well, please do it for us. And if you say you bake a mean chocolate chip cookie and don't show up with the chocolate chip cookie to your live audition, we're going to be really cranky.
Can speak to those very long days. Yes. I would also like to say I very much appreciate hearing this answer about resumes and how they help inform rather than deter. As a journalism major myself, who did not go to conservatory or have formal voice training at a college, university, I very much appreciate that answer, because for me, it was about the process of singing and working with a company. And so my resume would not have reflected that kind of incredible track where I knew the right people as I was moving along. So I just want to mention that for everybody, that yes, when you show up, it's about your voice and showing how much you learn and how fast you learn and how personable you are. So thank you for that answer. We're moving on to slightly different topics. How should I approach an audition when I'm singing for different adjudicators? Should I change my approach if I know a judge is looking for certain things? For example, singing for a diction coach versus a vocal coach.
My opinion on that is no, that you should show us who you are as an artist, what is special about you and makes you unique. Because if you try to focus on all those different aspects, each one separately, depending on the person who is adjudicating, then you're taking yourself away from what really makes you the individual. What I'm interested in an audition is someone who can walk into the room and really show me who they are in a way that moves me and in a way that's very special. And I think that you only do that by being authentic. And really giving yourself, your voice, your heart to the panel who's in the room with you. So I would advise singers to focus on that, focus on giving what you feel is special about you to us, rather than focusing on what our expectations might be.
It is great that you do your research, though. I will say that, especially if you do get a chance to speak to the people afterwards, that you have some context for what they might be giving you in feedback, that you can filter that a little bit better. And it's also just great to know who you're singing for. If you're singing for a festival or a company that does a lot of new American repertoire, then that helps you pick maybe different arias than if you're auditioning for a company that only does or primarily programs music from like 1800 to 1930. So it's really good that you do your research, but definitely stay true to yourself.
Do your diligence. I mean, if you're going to audition for Opera Saratoga, you need to know that Larry Edelson also runs the American Lyric Theater in New York. And this is super important. We do require a 21st century aria as part of our package because Opera Saratoga does perform contemporary rep every summer, and we really mean it when we ask for it, not 1950s. But to know that Larry's behind the table or behind the Zoom screen watching you, and that he has another company in New York that incubates and creates new opera. And if you present yourself with something that shows us that you are familiar with that sort of compositional language, vocabulary, that you're comfortable with something in the contemporary realm, he's going to perk up and say, huh, I've got this person's really interesting. And also it makes you more viable for our summer season.
I would say too to singers, always keep a log of your auditions. We keep a paper outside the room with our monitor at every HGO studio audition that tells the singers who are there that day who the panel is. So you can jot that down. But if that's not there, you can always ask if there's an audition monitor. Certainly, they should be able to answer the question for you. One of the pieces of advice I'm often giving to singers who ask me for specifically advice about career development, they're talking about auditions they've taken, who they sung for, and I'm always asking, well, who was there, who was on the panel? Because so much of this industry, I think, is about making those connections.
Absolutely, thank you. And the follow-up question to that is a little bit on the flip side. So different adjudicators, different areas of expertise, what specifically are we, all of you, listening for in singers? Is it technique, language, beauty of tone? What makes it that fantastic experience? Is it about the package? You've all spoken to this a little bit in various ways. This seems to be a more focused question at this time.
Going. I'll tell a very, very quick one. When I've judged for the Met in the past, and when we've traveled, we don't get paid for judging, but they do bring you out and you go to the local district or region, and they treat you wonderfully when you get there, and they give you a lovely dinner, and you're sitting with your colleagues enjoying your dinner. And after your dinner, they say, now we'd like our judges to get up and tell everybody what you look for in auditions. And you look at your colleague and you go, how about you start? And this has happened to me enough times that I finally had to get my elevator speech together. I think the baseline is that it's stipulated you have to sing, you have to have a good solid technique, you have to have we want to listen to the quality of the voice, of the sound, you're singing well. But then if the other 5 sopranos that sang Quantum and Vo are also singing it beautifully, what separates you apart from them? What have you done to make it personal? What have you done with the notes on the page and individualized them, made them organic? Do you communicate the text to us? Or are you just, my latest analogy when I coach is don't sing like a MIDI file. Okay, if you sing like a MIDI file and you're completely expressionless and you're just feeding us the notes on the page, I'm not as interested in this person who gets out of the MIDI file and shows us the individuality, what they bring to it, what the piece means to them, how they communicate.
I think it's important to also realize that of the 5 sopranos that sing Quantum and Vo so beautifully, you cannot make yourself be the one that we like the most. All you can do is present the very best you, and you cannot really, we're humans on our side too, and we have our taste and what thrills us, and it's going to be different across the board for everyone. And that's a hard thing to do, just to understand that that's where I always say, control the things that you can control. Do you know your music? Do you have your proper outfit that you're comfortable in and that makes you feel super amazing? And are you singing in tune? You can fix all those things. And then the one thing you can't change is our ears and our personal taste. That's just, it's one of the beautiful things, because it means that so much diversity can happen in our art, because there's room for so many types of sopranos and such. But it's also one of the challenges as an auditioner to realize you just can't control that.
That's such a great point, Carol, and especially for singers, because they want to go in and impress everybody, but we have to let go. As a singer, you have to let go of trying to impress someone and instead just express in your own unique way.
And I should add, when you walk in that door or when we push play on that recording, I think I could speak for everyone here that we're ready to be wowed every time. We're not waiting to see if you're going to mess up. We want to see what magic is going to happen. We hope that you're going to be the one that we're looking for.
Absolutely.
My friend David Small put this really, really beautifully once. He said, you imagine you're going into a bakery, and your bakery may have the best donuts in the world, but the person that walks in the door is jonesing for a bagel, and all you've got is donuts. Your donuts could be fabulous, but they want a bagel. And if their bagel isn't there, they're going to go to a different bakery. And I've always remembered, I thought this was the most wonderful analogy, so you guys make the baked goods that reflect your best.
Thank you for that. And everyone is making baked goods during pandemic. Absolutely. Carol, you mentioned attire really quickly in terms of a singer coming and being comfortable, and that's our next question right here. How strict do you consider general audition attire rules to be? For example, most female singers, particularly of their sopranos, wear some sort of knee-length, jewel-toned wrap dress. How would you feel about a soprano wearing a jumpsuit, which is something that is normally considered to be a mezzo pantsuit option? Are you terribly bored by the uniformity of what singers generally wear, or is it simply better to do nothing that would distract from the singing?
I think that if you want to wear a jumpsuit, and that makes you feel fierce and in control of your day, then you wear that jumpsuit. If it's leather pants, wear the leather pants. If it is the jewel tone wrap dress, then wear that. We just want to see you. I think we want you to wear what is most comfortable to, again, make you present the best that you can. And I'll tell you this, it's kind of funny. You show up with the yellow shoes or the unusual tie or something. We're going to make a note about that because that makes you memorable. And I'm not saying you have to have a signature article of clothing, but we do enjoy seeing your personality reflected through your look.
It's really true. I've made that note myself on some audition comments. Person with the yellow shoes. Yes, yes, indeed. This next question is extremely interesting, especially in the age of employment and social media. Once you've made your choice of singers, do you look into their social media sites for more information about what kind of person you're considering?
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, we will check out, and sometimes if it's after live auditions, I may go on Facebook just to remind myself this was the person that did this. But yeah, I do check them out, and we go on your website sometimes and see what's on the website. I mean, we don't stalk you down to the nth degree, but if I'm curious, I may look on social media. Absolutely.
I would say yes too, but that the majority of what I find is just of interest. It adds personality to the character of the person if I can see it, and may, teach me something interesting about them that makes them in many ways perhaps a more appealing candidate. I don't go out there looking for disqualifications. If I found one though, it might affect things. So that is something I think to be aware of.
I think 150 people just set their Facebook settings to private right now.
It's a very good question in today's day and age. It looks like we might be winding down. I'm wondering if there's any last comments from the panelists that they'd like to offer in this webinar for all these singers that are listening.
I just want to say thank you to the singers for all that they give to us. We are all in this business because of you and what you have to offer, to this art form. And it is really an honor for us to be sitting on this side of the table. And it's something I know all of us, I think I can speak for my colleagues, we're reminding ourselves of that continually. So thank you for bearing with us through this crazy year, and thank you for, continuing to have faith in this art form and this industry, because it's important, I think, as Melissa said earlier, that we have that trust between those on this side of the table and those who are, sort of coming into the room and bearing your souls for us.
I want to echo that. From the technology standpoint, I was so impressed by how quickly and completely the singers were nimbly adapting to this new format. And they were universally tremendously supportive in a very, very challenging situation. And everyone should be so proud of the incredible work that they put into their audition materials in this most unusual year in particular.
Well, thank you, everybody. This was so informative. We're getting lots of comments thanking you all for your insights. I'm going to turn it back to Laura Lee Everett to help us close out this evening.
Thank you all so much. I know that it's really helpful. The comments in the chat, the comments in the Q&A. I know there were a couple of other questions that were specific we didn't get to. We'll try to do what we can to get answers back to you all. And this is, just a small representation of all of the people who are in this part of the field, who come together and really are working to give every opportunity to hear and learn about all of you out there who are performers, and also to try to make this process as open and accessible as possible. So please reach out if you have questions. Please also keep in contact with what we have on our site, on the NAT site, on the NOA site about best practices. We really will do everything possible to make this as easy and as helpful for you all to show us your best you. Thank you, Julie, Lori, Melissa, Brian, Carol, and especially Preeti for guiding us through all of this. It's really an honor to spend an evening with all of you. And I hope that we get to do it all again in person really soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Recording will be posted later and you'll receive information if you registered for this evening. You are welcome to share it with your students and your colleagues. And I hope it's been as helpful for you all as it has for us to be able to share what really happens on the other side of the audition table. Have a wonderful evening.